Alright, how's everybody doing tonight? Pretty excited, huh? Pretty pumped. Well, tonight, this is week 5, believe it or not. And we're going to jump right into it. Got a few slides to go over first. I'm going to skip slide 2, which is the same, basically same apps from a couple weeks ago. So, last week, we went over GitHub and also submitting your final app. Both of the submitting final app ID is due by tonight at midnight. If you've not yet submitted that into week 4, please do so. Tonight we're going to cover what's called fork and cloning in GitHub to get started in just a second when we do our in-class lab. We're going to do the in-class lab a little different. You should have had 2 handouts with you. One is Hide Keyboard and Scrollview handout, and the second is 4 sheets of code, right? What I've done is I've actually given you a start app to start with tonight, since it's quite a larger app to start with. No way to get done in class. So what we'll be doing is going over it line by line within the code and having you look at the code that's on your handout after you do the git fork and clone. We'll also be going over Hide Keyboard, which is essential when you're creating a mobile app. When you run an app, everybody knows you click on a text box, let's say, and you start tap your finger in there, the keyboard pops up and you begin typing. Well, it doesn't just magically go away, keyboard. You have to program that in. We'll talk about how that's done tonight and show you how that's done in code, and also in what's called delegation, and also what's called view control. And then we'll also talk about scroll views. Scroll views is, in a nutshell, a way to put more objects on one view to manage your views better. Since you're limited in space on mobile apps, scroll views are used to actually scroll to a certain portion of the view to get to a certain object. That makes sense? So if you have 20 text fields, one on top of the other, it's not going to fit in an iPhone screen. But with a UI scroll view, you can do that. You can fit all of them on there and scroll through your objects. We'll learn about all the different parts and pieces of Scrollview tonight too, some of the terminologies. Once we go over all that, I'm going to fire up a demo on the overhead we'll look at, and then we'll have you do a fork and clone, which I'll show you what that is on GitHub tonight. You'll download the starting code app, and then you will take the handout, plus the handout is also in the cloned project that you'll download. That way, if we get running too long, you can copy and paste code toward the end here to make sure you get it all in there. So, fork and clone, let's talk about that for a second. Forking basically allows you in GitHub to copy an existing GitHub repo to your repo. Up to this point in GitHub, you've learned how to connect, create a repo, do a push to repo as far as pushing your content once it's been completed. A commit and sync is what we went over last week. Tonight we're going to learn the next step, which is forking. Forking is used because if you don't fork a repo and you just download a repo from anybody's repository, more than likely you're not going to have rights to make changes to that repo that you just downloaded from wherever it was you downloaded on GitHub. So what forking allows you to do is kind of like on a dinner plate. When you reach over to somebody's steak and bring it over to your plate, it's yours now. You can eat it, right? While it's on their plate, you can't eat it. Well, you shouldn't anyway. In my household, you get in trouble. So forking allows you to basically copy that repo into your GitHub account, and then when you do a clone, which we'll do tonight, it will be yours now to do with whatever you want to with that repo. Does that make sense? And so forking and cloning is essential. As I mentioned on the last bullet, you must use fork before cloning your repos to your local Mac in order to be able to save changes back to GitHub. Okay. So let's go over some terminologies of hiding keyboard, what it's about first. When objects like a UI text field we'll look at tonight, a UI text view, The difference between these two, by the way, a UI text field is just a one-liner text field to enter in first name, last name, email, phone number, address, things like that. UI text view is a multi-line to where you can put in comments, notes, stuff like that. Okay. But anyway, when you enter one of these objects on a view, it automatically becomes what's called a first responder, not first reposter. First responder is basically whenever you connect to an object, now the app says this is a first responder. So because it's a first responder, we're going to give it a keyboard view, keyboard show. The first responder fires the keyboard hooks to show the keyboard, and only first responders are only fired, or the first responder is only fired automatically on outlets. Outlets would be UI text fields and UI text views, right? An outlet would not be a first responder. You could, in essence, tie a first responder to a button, which we'll actually do that tonight. We'll actually show you how a button can become an outlet, not just an action. And when buttons are used as outlets in coding mobile apps is when you want to do something with that object, like changing the text of that object programmatically, or in tonight's case, go to that object in a scroll to a certain location where that object's at. But for the most part, out of the box, you're creating apps, UI text fields and UI text views are default, de facto, first responders to when you tap on them, a keyboard pops up. And everybody's had a chance, hopefully, to use one of those, whether you just got your iPad last week or you've had one for a while, you've had an iPhone or iPad. You know what I'm talking about when it comes to firing up an app and putting your finger in a text field and the keyboard popping up. Okay, you can create apps all day, but the problem is if you don't hide the keyboard is going to stay up resident on that app. And so it can become problemsome when you get a lot of objects on that app. What I mean by that is, real estate wise, if this is an iPhone app here that I'm drawing up here, and you have all of your buttons up in this portion, and your text fields and buttons and UI views all up here, you're okay. Okay. Keyboard, you don't ever have to hide it. But how many apps only use up 30% of real estate? They use up all of it. And so that's why the benefit of hiding the keyboard comes into play. So they have made it a little bit easier, by the way, in Swift to hide keyboards than Objective-C. The amount of code lines I counted the last few days to hide a keyboard in Objective-C took about 35 lines of code. To hide a keyboard in Swift takes about 6 lines of code. And so quite a bit fewer lines. That's nice. And fairly easy to implement. The same concepts you'll learn tonight on hiding keyboard, you can use on every single app you create from this week on. Make sense? It's not going to change in Swift anyway, okay, as far as the concept. Now, will Swift ever change on, like we found out a few weeks back when they changed versions on certain things, on labels or whatever? Yeah, for sure, probably. But as far as the logic of how things done, the logic hasn't changed in Objective-C, it's just how things are coded have changed a little bit in Swift. That makes sense? So, the keyboard must be hidden via what's called delegates, which we'll go over tonight, code, and then tap gesture combination. So delegate, code, and then tap gesture combination. Tap gesture refers to tapping the screen somewhere, whether it be on the view itself, whether it be on a scroll view, whether it be on a text field, whether it be on a text view, all right? You're tapping somewhere at all times. Might be a button as well, okay? So tap gesture is implemented in place of what on a PC and Mac? What does tap gesture replicate on a PC and Mac? What does the tap represent on a PC and Mac? If we were to kind of correlate it to something that we're used to in non-mobile apps. Yeah, the mouse click, right? It's simple as that. It's your mouse click. Mouse clicks have right click, left click, things of that nature. And you can programmatically program in your code into apps, things like right click, left click, different types of gestures as well. You might have heard of recently, since iOS 8, they've come up with umpteen amount of different types of keyboards out there now. Different swipe keyboards and swipe recognition. You can come up with your own languages. You know, you can do this can be A, that can be B. You know, just crazy. You can come up with your own alphabet, basically, on how you do things. And then it'll recognize that for you as a person. So let's talk about some terminologies and some functions within Hide Keyboard and also Scrollview. So on Hide Keyboard, basically what this is, when you want to hide a keyboard, when you touch the view controller. Now the view controller, remember, is the root of every view. The view controller is. It's the base root of, if you don't have the view controller, you're not going to be able to do anything on that view. Okay, it's what you lay everything upon. It's your canvas for your buttons, your text boxes, your text views, your images, whatever it is you're putting on there. So here's a simple function, and this is one, again, you can use from here on out. Override func touch begin, and then left parentheses touches, colon, NSS set, comma, with event, UI event. All that simply means is it's going to fire upon the touch of the view default. That's what this is going to do. So one thing I put in this code here, in between the left and right brackets, anything I put in here, basically, I can put in code to hide or fire either one. Just an example, this might not be used like it is here to force resign this text first object, which is a text field, and to fire what's called end editing true. All this is doing, by the way, is saying it's replicating the return key on a keyboard, or the enter key on your virtual keyboard on an iOS app. Okay, that's what the end editing true means. The other thing you might use this for in gaming is, say you want to tap on any part of the screen to fire a gun. Maybe you've seen apps like that. Anywhere on the screen, doesn't really matter. An example would be, those of you, this will age me a little bit, the old school game Galaga. Anybody remember that? 3 people. Galaga, you can download the iOS game for that, by the way. But it's touch screen on the iOS game. On any portion of the screen, you can tap, and then you can basically use the accelerometer to move the spaceship that's firing the bullets, basically. So as you're moving it, it's moving the ship, and as you're tapping the screen, it's firing. So this could be used, this function here could just be used for anything we want to be used to fire when somebody taps a screen. Does that make sense? We're using it this week, and it is used a lot to hide the keyboard, which makes sense. If you're in a text field, say on any text field on your app, and you want to get away and hide the keyboard, you tap away onto the, most people have used mobile apps for any period of time know that. It's inherent, right? You tap away from that field, keyboard goes away. This is where it happens, okay, on the view. Now tonight we're going to have to do a little different in the fact that our base for our objects is a scroll view. So we're going to have to implement scroll view in this tab as well. But just know for right now that the override function touch begins, and could this be called something besides touch begins? Yes, it could. Could this be called something besides touches? Yes, it could. NSS set, it has to be with event, UI event has to be that. But anytime you look up anything with hiding in Swift and even Apple development code examples, they always use override func touch begin, touches begin, all right? And all this is doing is forcing to resign the first responder and hiding the keyboard, in this case, for text first when the user touches a view controller, all right? Now you could imagine you could have umpteen objects on there, and anytime they touch a view controller, if you have the name of that object, dot end editing true in parentheses, it's going to hide the keyboard for any object you might be clicked on at the time. Next is a function that I've created. You'll see a lot of app developers create this, called dismiss keyboard. And you can probably imagine what this is for. To dismiss a keyboard, right? You put in this function all the objects that could ever fire the first responder, which would be like a text field or a UI text view. Anything that's going to fire the first responder for the keyboard to show, you're going to put in here, and do whatever the object name is, .end editing true, and again, it's going to force it. And you can call this function from anywhere. It's real popular to call this function within a submit button. Okay, you have a whole form of, say, 20 fields. At the end of it, you tap submit, and it hides any keyboard that might be open, possibly, that could be open. That makes sense? And so anything that might be open at the time when you submit it, you could also fire it. So this function basically is a function, just does not return anything. It's just a function, and the reason I know it doesn't return anything is it has empty value here in the left-right parentheses. And if I was to call this, it would, if by chance my tap was inside the text first field and I had a button or something that fired and called this, it would hide the keyboard. Make sense? It would hide it regardless where my tap was at the time. Yes?
Instead of specifically putting each object in that function,
Yep.
iterate through the object
Yep.
selection.
We're going to do that in a second. Yep. You can definitely do that. This is just another way to do it. So first is view control. One is, creating a function with all your objects. And then we'll go over in just a second how you can iterate it in 2 or 3 lines of code. So this basically is always generally put in a certain, like an example in this is put in the view did load. And remember, what's a view did load used in app development and Swift? What is a view did load when it comes to when the app sees that view and you view it? What's going to happen in the view did load? What's its function? Remember? On there, say you had 20 functions in the view did load, or 20 functions in a view. Does view did load take precedence over every other function in that view controller? Remember? Anybody? View did load does take precedence over every other function when you hit a view controller. Okay? And the one I'm showing you here is actually from the app we're looking at tonight, and it's inside the view did load. And notice I put a comment in here that says it looks for single or multiple taps. I'm declaring a variable called tap, UI tap gesture recognizer equals UI tap gesture recognizer target is self, meaning that view controller. Action is calling a function called dismiss keyboard that we already went over. Okay. Now it will not throw an error because this is in quotes. It will not throw an error. The Intellisense will not catch that dismiss keyboard doesn't exist because it's in quotes. But you need to create it if you want to call it. And so the way this would be called is right now on the tap gesture. Again, it would be firing that one we did at the very first of the view controller. This would actually be binding that self, which would be the main view controller, with the action dismiss keyboard anytime that view controller is tapped as well. Also, because I have a scroll view on this app and it actually embeds all of the objects within my app, I have to actually add that tap gesture to the scroll view. It's real simply done, scrollview.add gesture recognizer tap, which is done up here. All right. Now my scroll view has a tap gesture recognizer as well. Anytime anyone taps the scroll view, it fires and kills the keyboard on any object that might be tapped at the time and resident at the time. So if I'm on object 3, let's say email, text field, and I tap the scroll view, it's going to hide the keyboard. Okay. Scroll views. Real simply put, scroll views are used to wrap objects to scroll on one view controller. And like tonight's app, I'll crudely draw an example of that. Up to this point, we've stayed within the realm of a view controller, but this is where the power of scroll view would come in. You have a scroll view that does this on your app. Okay, it actually goes beyond the limits of the mobile device and continues on down. And you can actually add in whatever you want all the way down to the very bottom of the app and hit submit or whatever it is you want to do. Tonight we're actually going to use it to kind of simulate two separate views. We're going to actually have a portion of it simulate basically a whole nother screen or a whole nother view in and of itself, to where we can go to it, come back, go to it, come back. The user thinks it's different views. It's all the same view. Gaming apps will do that a lot. If you have properties, it's not uncommon to have gaming apps have properties up to 100, 150 properties per screen that the user might have to set. Audio control apps, like here on campus, we have an audio control app we use to control our amps for all of our events. Each screen has roughly 75 to 150 controls that uses Scrollview to go down and radio buttons, usually yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, all the way down, and then saves those preferences. Preferences, I just mentioned, is another one that you'll see Scrollview use a lot on apps, regardless what the app is. Again, because it's utilizing one view. Once you learn how to go to certain areas of the view, it's really easy to implement. So you can literally pinpoint, if you want to go to this area every time, you can have a button up here and it will go to that area every time. You have a button down here that wants to come up here every time to the top. You can have a button that does that and it'll go to that location every time. Okay. And again, scrolling allows you to do that using the UI scroll view. Very powerful, used in every app just about I've ever created as some type of scroll view in that app. It also is helpful when you're typing in a form to have a scroll view, because the text field that you're on at the time is always at the very top portion of that app that you're on at the time. You're not having to go down, down, down. It just, you tap on a field, it goes up to the top. Tap on a field, goes up to the top. Tap on a field, goes up to the top. Tap on a field, goes up to the top. Okay, and you'll learn how that all works tonight. And by the way, the code we use to do that, it's 4 separate functions, can be used in every single app to go to the exact point where that text field is or that UI text view is every time the user taps on a scroll view. Scroll views are outlets, okay? They're not an action, they're an outlet, meaning they're going to view something. They're holding something in this case, which is, I like to explain it, it's a container of other objects to manage effectively on a screen. It uses what's called CG point to determine where to place the object in a scroll view. And CG point will, by default, want top and bottom coordinates. And generally what it's looking for is left and top coordinates. What I mean by that is we'll talk more about later, but you might have heard of XY coordinates. Think of F or X as from left, Y, think as from top. Okay? That's all we want to think of X and Y and how we're going to use it in mobile development. So regardless of where you're at in the screen, X is from left, Y is from top of wherever it is, whatever your screen resolution might be. It could be an iPhone, iPad. Tonight we're going to do an iPhone only, but it could be any device, doesn't really matter. So here's some code. If you wanted to scroll to the very top of a scroll view, here's some code that would allow you to do that. So if we want to set the scroll point of a scroll view to go to 0, X0, Y0, X from left, Y from top, we would use this scroll set. So here's the name of my scroll view. Set content offset. CG point 0 is going to be 0, 0, meaning 0 left, 0 top. Animated true, what that means is I could be at the bottom of my scroll view and it's going to go up to the top. It's going to animate. You're going to actually see it move. It's going to animate, go up, go down, go up, go down, go up, down all day long. Now, does it pretty fast? Yes.
So are the coordinates in pixels?
Yes, coordinates are in pixels that we've not went over, but yep, they are in pixels. And they're going again from X, left, it's easiest to explain it, from left, and then Y from top, Mike. So if we want to go to a certain object, like in this example here, if I wanted to go from a button to a button object, which we do in this app tonight, I basically had to declare a variable for first as a CG point, and I'm declaring an empty variable, var scroll point, colon CG point, and I put in my comments there again, X from left, Y from top, get X0 in this case, and Y is a location of BTN back button. Scroll point equals, here's my scroll point equals CG point make 0, which comes from what? Left or top? Left, right? From left. BTN back, frame origin dot Y. What that's going to do is say it's going to give me the Y coordinates of that button wherever it's at on the screen. We'll say the Y coordinates is 568. That's what's going to put it. That's exactly where it's going to go on the screen. Say below that button, I've got a view and another button. It's going to go right to this line every time that I click on that button. Make sense?
Where does it bring it in? So you have your view that you see.
Mm-hmm.
So now you scroll down to that other button.
Left and right mic, it never moves.
Right.
Just straight
Right.
down
Straight down.
to whatever
So
the
now-
line
so
is.
now-
In this case, 568.
So now you press the other button and go back up.
Press the other
Does
button,
that
go
bring
back
it
up.
to the middle of this
Nope.
view or the bottom or the
Nope, we'll show you in a second. You can go, you'll go right to the top every time.
where's the top?
If you want, you can go anywhere else if you want to, but the default, I'll show you in a second, is going back to the CG0, which is the very top. Yep. So here is the, let's go back to the one you were mentioning. It would be this one right here. So the back button, this one right here, the back button to go back here to the top of my view, of my scroll view, I would set it to this right here. That's all I need is one line of code. The name of the scroller, dot set content offset, CG.0 be 00, and a true. Okay. In fact, CG.0 technically doesn't mean 00. What it actually means is if I go back to this slide here, to the beginning, which I don't have it in this one here, is basically however it's called in the view did load. And the way I have it called in the view did load is the top is 50. The top is 50. It's 050. And the reason I put 50 up there is there's a label I have at the top of my app called My Contacts. I want it to be 50 from the top of my view. And you have to hard code that in. Otherwise, the view would go all the way to the very top. You did 00. Regardless of where you place it on your app, it always goes 00. Yep.
So if you're going to the origin then, do you go like origin plus 40?
Yeah, if you wanted to add something. In fact, in the code, in fact, on the handout, jumping ahead a little bit, but at least you can see it. If you go on the code handout that I gave you, keep flipping the page to page 2 of 4. Page 204 and number 9 on page 204. See where it says, it's on line 59, by the way. I printed these out where you can see the line numbers. Line 59 where it says modifying existing view did load function. If you scroll down to line 73, see where it says scroll view dot frame equals CG rec make 050. 50 is where that top number is. And that's basically the CG0 that we're calling throughout the app. CG0 will always come back to the 050. Wherever you set it here, that frame, that dot frame is what it's set at by default throughout the entire app cycle. Okay, so let's go ahead now. With that said, I'm going to do a demo on the overhead of the final app. But before, I'm going to go and do that first. Then I'll walk you through these steps tonight. I'm logging into GitHub on a Mac, online, doing the fork and clone, following the instructions. Because what you're going to basically do is you have a shell of the app, and you're going to basically plug in the code, and it's verbatim with your code handout. You're going to be putting in code, I believe it is 13 steps or something like that, 12 or 13 lines, 13 steps of code. But I want to go over it line by line when we do it. So let me show you a demo first, and then we'll go right into the forking and cloning. So you just watch on the overhead, and this is what we're going to be doing here. This is what the end result will be. So here's the final app, what it'll look like. It's a real simple app called My Contacts. It's a single view app. And go ahead and put in my first name, last name, and you notice as I go to the next field, it goes to the very top each time. Okay. And I'll hit save. It's going down to the bottom part of that view now. And I have in here, because it was empty, I put in there my contacts and then line and then the 3 lines that I did at the top. I'm going to go back, fill another one in. Okay. We'll go back, say I forget one of these. Ted Smith, and I forget to put the email in. It'll alert me, which will show you how that works tonight. You'd want validation in your code to make sure people are filling out what they need to fill out. And notice it doesn't go down where it's supposed to go if they fill it out properly. So I'll go ahead and fill out the rest here. Okay, and this has a scroller in this too. Now I can actually just go to view contacts and back now all day long. Now it doesn't save it to a database. This example is just to show you how UI Scrollview works, how to go to certain points in your Scrollview, and how to effectively do that with your objects. Okay. So let's do this real quick. In your in-class exercise, what I'd like to do is get us to step 5, which is basically where you've cloned my example, your start example from GitHub. So what you need to do, the first 2 steps, you'll need to log into the GitHub on your Mac first with your username, password, credentials for GitHub. Then you'll need to go to github.com, log in with your credentials there as well. Then come back to the in-class exercise and you'll click on the start, go to week 5 start file and stop there. Stop on number 3. That way I'll walk around and make sure everybody's there before we do the fork and clone. Okay? Questions on that? Yes.
On that scroll view,
Yep.
and then you basically navigating down that scroll view. How come you have to specifically tell it to show scroll bar on the right hand side so you can drag?
No, you don't. It does it automatically. You don't have to.
I can see it.
Yeah, you're not going to see it. It's invisible.
Always.
You can show it if you want to. I have it invisible.
That's
And a lot of times Apple's going towards not showing it to just have more real estate. Because it's fairly intuitive now. Most users know just to swipe up and they can get like a newspaper or something. Yep. Yeah. The default is not to show it. But we will go over about 4 sets of functions that will show exactly where you can manipulate where to go for that scroll point. Cool. So go ahead and do steps 1, 2, and 3. And then as I walk around, when I see that your screen is on your GitHub account, or take it back, when I see that your screen's on step 3, which is the start file, GitHub project, the repo, stop there. Because I want to fork together and clone together. So okay, on the right side of your screen, there is in GitHub, unwatch, star, and fork. Everybody see those 3? What you're going to do is you have to make sure this will not work if you're not logged into GitHub, both on your Mac and also on github.com. You have to remember that before you do this every week. Click on the fork button. When you click on the fork button, if you have multiple accounts in GitHub, it'll say which account do you want to fork this to. As you notice, I have 3 other accounts, so I'm going to click on my Chukon account. You click on your account face.
Does it matter if ours says watch rather than unwatch?
Doesn't matter. No, just everybody click on fork. Everybody should have that. So everybody click on your face, your GitHub account. Then it's going to do this here. It's going to start forking it. It's moving it from my repo on iOS course to Chukon, my personal repo. Should do the same for you. Now you should have your name at the top / week 5 hidden keyboard Scrollview start. Everybody have that? All right. Everybody clear so far?
Yeah, if you don't have multiple accounts, it doesn't actually show up.
Do what now?
If you don't have more than one account, it
Yeah.
doesn't show like your.
Yeah, it just shows another account up there.
Mine didn't show it. Mine just went directly to the.
Oh, it did. Okay, cool. Cool. Anybody need help getting to this point here where you see your account forked? Okay, so what you should do now is with Mac's, your Mac GitHub account logged in, you've done the fork on GitHub after you logged in. Now on the right side of the screen, you'll see two options at the very bottom of the screen, two buttons actually. Download zip and clone in desktop. We're going to use clone in desktop. Everybody click on that. Then it'll prompt you, hey, do you really want to launch this application? This link needs to be open with an application send to, and it should highlight GitHub if you already have it running. Click OK. And by the way, if you click the please remember it won't prompt after that, but I don't because I usually show a lot of people throughout the year how to do this, so I don't check it. So easiest place to put this for right now, just so everybody knows where it's at and where we can, because you're going to basically be submitting what you're done with at the end of the night in GitHub, doing commit and sync. Let's everybody select on the left side of your Mac desktop. And so now we're ready. You should have two buttons and only two buttons. Cancel and clone. That's it on the bottom right. Cancel and clone is all you should have. If you have more than that, let me know. But you should just have cancel and clone on the bottom right. Now you'll have your new folder, Mac folder, but we're not worried about that. Yes, Mike.
Mine went into GitHub. I show only as a,
Uh-huh.
but it's coming.
I'll come by and help you on it. I'll come by and see what happened. Everybody select desktop and then click clone. Then it should go to GitHub after you click clone. It should go to your GitHub account after that. Oh no, it's trying to prompt to save somewhere. You just click the drop down and select desktop on the left. Yeah, you just haven't expanded your save as yet. So if you don't see the desktop guys on the left side of the screen like mine was, you have to click that drop down selection to see all of your files and folders on there. Then once you finally get it selected, it should clone it. Then as it did on mine, go right to that GitHub repo and highlight it. It'll be gray background with black text. Everybody have that? Yep, you got it. You're good. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. Anybody else need help on that? Yes. That's perfect. Yep. Anybody else need a question? Okay, now here's how you're going to open your repos every time. You're not going to go to your desktop. You're not going to go into Xcode. You're going to go into GitHub, wherever the repo is, and follow my instructions here in just a second. Actually, click on my repos. Looks like it's still downloading. And are you downloading? slow down. So you got your, on the left side of your screen, you should have all your repos. The one that you just downloaded should have highlighted it. What you're going to do is you're going to do a command click on that line. Command click on that repo line where I'm pointing to on the overhead. When you do a command click, I'm sorry, I said command, it's control. Control click, command click will do nothing. Control click, I want you to select Open in Finder. Not View on GitHub, Open in Terminal, Open into Atom, but Open in Finder. When you do that, it's going to take you right to the location where you download it to, which should be your desktop. You say, why can't we just go to desktop instead of doing this? Okay, it's fine now because you only have one repo on your desktop, but as you begin programming, you'd have hundreds of thousands of repo on your Mac, right? If you choose your mode of operandus to always open your repos through GitHub, you will always go to the correct repo folder. Okay, some of you might have already had this happen. Maybe say that you're working on you downloaded some code from your email, worked on it on your Mac, went to upload it, and you're like, none of my changes are there. Maybe because in some cases, when we download something on a Mac environment, it's always going to download into a download folder called download. And if you begin working on your code in download, but you're actually thinking you're working on your code on your desktop folder, two separate entities, two separate places. So if you always open up your code via the way I just showed you, find it on your repo in GitHub, control click, open in Finder, you'll never go wrong. Okay? Once you do that, everybody in here, making sure I want you to open up in the right version of Xcode, especially if you're working on the Macs in here, do another control click on the .xcode proj and make sure and open it up with Xcode 6.1. Xcode 6.1. All right. Everybody got that? Now what it should land on, if I'm not mistaken, like mine did, is the viewcontroller.swift file should be in view, okay? And you should have numbers 1, if you scroll down, numbers 1 through number 13 on the comments in that Swift file, all right? Anybody need help getting to this place here? Okay, my mouse is on the viewcontroller.swift. It should already go there by default when it opened up because that's where I uploaded it to. Go to. All right. Anybody not there? Okay. Yes. Oh, he had that problem with it downloading. Let's try let's control. Remove it. And also, let's make sure it's not on the desktop. View control dot switch. All right. All right, so keep that up in front of you, the view controller Swift. I want you to now minimize your Xcode environment by clicking on the yellow button at the top left, not the red or green, but the yellow or orange. And I want you to basically click down to your desktop on your Mac, because there's another file I want you to look at. So if you open up that desktop folder that you downloaded and cloned, there should be a couple of files in here I want you to make note of. One is the PDF file, the Hide Keyboard and Scrollview.pdf. That is a version of this file here, this handout here that says Hide Keyboard and Scrollview. Okay. The Word document one with the same name is a Word document, so you can make notes in there, whatever you want to do. Not tonight, but when you do this at home. And then the code for steps.txt, the code for steps.txt. If you double click on that file, it's going to bring it up in a text edit file, which is basically the text version of what you have here on the handout. The one that has at the top of it, users, Charles Conkle documents, this one right here. Okay. It doesn't have the lines in it, but it's got all the code. And the reason I want you to have this up on the screen, on your screen, and also the handout is, for time's sake, if you know that you're a slow typer and you don't want to mess with typing, you can copy and paste the code as well from this text file versus typing it in, whatever you feel more comfortable doing. So let me just show you here. I'm going to go back to Xcode now. So we're back to my Xcode environment. And I want everybody to click on main.storyboard. And you should see what I see, hopefully, on the overhead. And we're going to go ahead and run this to make sure there's no errors before we do anything. And by the way, that's in the steps as well. Okay. So Command R, Command Keyboard, Command Key, and the letter R will compile and build this app. Give it a moment and it should compile it into iPhone 5S simulator, which should look like this. If it's a little bigger than mine on your screen, where do I go to resize this? Do you remember on the simulator? Where do I go to resize or zoom in, zoom out, or whatever? Remember? I have a little help for you up here on the overhead. Windows scale, I'm at 75%, but say yours is at 100%, it's like really big like that or something. You can actually go to Windows scale and bring it down to 75% to where you can see the whole thing on your screen. It's not going to do anything right now, but the objects should be on there like I have on the overhead, and it should run and compile successfully. If it does not, let me know. And again, it might take a few moments to run. Let me come around and make sure you got this running before we go on any further. Yeah, it's still compiling. You see a black screen, it's still compiling. It's going to take a minute or two, or a moment at least, so just don't do anything while it's compiling. First time it does that on your Macs, you're compiling it fresh and new, and it is normal to see a black screen for a little bit while it's compiling. And by the way, anytime you first compile an app on your Xcode environment, it's going to do that very first time. It'll do it longer depending upon how many objects are actually on that app, how many objects are actually running on that app. Eventually, then you should see the black go away and the Hide Keyboard prompt splash screen come up, and it should end up with this here. Go ahead and go back to your Xcode environment. Yep, click play. to your simulator. Let's go to iOS simulator. You have to click on simulator. Press and hold it, and press and hold that icon. Yep. And go up to simulator, iPhone 6. You're going to go to 5S. Yep. Your simulator's locked up. Make sure you're doing a simulator in 5S too, which looks like you are. So you're good. If the simulator does crash, which it does sometimes, you might have to kill a simulator at times, which you have to do tons of time in development. That's not a uncommon thing. The other thing that will kill a simulator is if you have multiple simulators up, it'll tell you cannot run the simulator. It will not have rights. That generally means you have multiple simulators up. Just make sure all your simulators are killed. Do a build and recompile it. You need to go up and change the window scale 50. And it should actually be this way. Yeah, you're good. You have the wrong one. The button's working. Also, too, sometimes you might have to do a project clean on project menu clean. Well, sometimes if it doesn't build right on some of your machines, or if ever you have an app that is not building correctly, the project menu on Xcode clean and the project build will sometimes clean it correctly. Save. Nope. Good. Good. Need some. I want to see this on everybody's screen running before we go any further. Why don't you get your phone over there? Okay, again, this is not going to run or, we're not going to be able to type anything in. We can type stuff in, but it's not going to save or view contacts right now because it's just basically a shell of the app. There's no code in it yet. So you go ahead and stop running the app now. Just hit the stop button on the Xcode environment. And I want everybody to go to the viewcontroller.swift. Now, in the viewcontroller.swift file, it's numbered 1 through 13. And I'll do the first one with you. In fact, I'll do the first two with you together, okay? On number 1 on your handout here, there's comments, and I put them in there for a reason. In fact, I say on each one of these sections to add the below code for steps.txt, which is this file here that you're looking at, or the one that's you've had you download and open up from your desktop folder. And that's this one right here, remember? So if you're a slow typer, you don't want to mess with typing, I'm not going to get on to you for not typing, okay? But I do want everybody in here, regardless if you type or copy and paste, read every single comment before you type or copy and paste the code in. Does that make sense? I've taught programming enough to know when you do this, you will learn if you do it this way, okay? Now, granted, when I put this together, I put the code in here in a way to where it's in a logical order to where you can understand it. If you were to build this from scratch, where the placement of all these functions are might not be in there in your code. Does that make sense? I've moved them around on purpose, just for learning purposes. So, all right, so let's go do step 1 together. It says, step 1, add a message box function using alert view. And I'm inside of viewcontroller.swift. The functions you notice have already been created. So all you're going to have to do here, it says inside the function message box, it's function message box, message NSS string, this line right here, that's done. Left parentheses is done, and right parentheses is done. This is a real function. The only thing is it's an empty function. It's not doing anything right now, okay? So it says here, add below code for steps and read the comments. The comment is create alert. So put your cursor on the end of that comment that says create alert, hit enter, and on your page where it says create alert, that very same comment, you're going to type in from the var line, line 5, to the alert line, line 9, alert.show. Type all that in, or if you want to copy and paste, you may do that as well. And I will type in as you're doing, or if you don't want to type in, you can copy and paste, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to do the first two along with you and then let you go at it. If you get an error on a line, you typed in something incorrect. So make sure it is very syntax oriented. And don't worry about if you get an error on a line before you finish an entire section of code that you're typing in. By typing it in, you do get the Intellisense that basically it'll kind of tell you, oh, were you thinking of this? And like this message here I'm typing, I just type in MESS and I double tap and it gets the rest of it for me. I don't have to type all of it in. Do what now? With type function? There is, but we're not going to use it. Nope. There is, Mike. That's the short way. We're not doing the short way right now. It's not a lot of code, by the way, you have to type in, but all right. So I've done 1. You might still be working on 1. I don't know. But I'm going to go on to number 2. Number 2 is a override function, touch begin. This is the area that add a touch begin function to catch the screen tap and resign keyboard. It says on number 2. The code I have to add here is on number 2 on your handout, on where it says forces resign, first responder, and hides keyboard. 3 lines of code. Text first, text last, and text email. Lines 15, 16, and 17. are the only lines of code you're having to type in there. And you'll keep doing that all the way down. Now, I'll stop for just a second if you wouldn't mind looking with me. When you get through all the way to line 159, which is page 4, and believe me, it's not going to take you that long to get there. That's when you want to do another compile. And does anybody remember what I just showed you on the short code, key command, short keyboard command I just showed you on how to compile your code? Command R, yeah, Command R. Just remember that. Any questions before you continue on your own? Because I'm just going to kind of walk around. Yeah.
So, is there any reason why the class and all that? Is there any reason why it's like the same color as the comment? I mean, is it the same color or is it not?
It's a different color. It should be actually like I'm getting ready to do the text first right now. Text first dot text, no, dot end. It's an actual object. It's calling a method. When you're calling a method, that's what this one's doing. Let me finish this one up. Yeah, when it's calling a method, which we're using a method end editing, it will be the green text. You're correct. Yep, it will be. Because that's an object we're using, which is text first that we created. Objects will always be green that we use, whether it be a text box, a button. And a little tip for you as you're typing your code, like on number 2, you'll notice end editing true is on all 3. So you could, after you type the first one, copy the dot whatever and paste it to the next 2. All right, does that make sense? So you don't have to type all that in manually each time if you don't want to. And those are little tricks you'll learn as you go along in coding, just to speed things up a little bit for you. And again, if you get an error as you go along, or if you need help on something, let me know. Click and hold my message box to right where I want it. Now make sure you don't release it till right where you want it, where mine's right below number 1. Now I release it, and it's right back to where it needs to be. Okay? Everybody got that? Tracy, you guys okay? Oh, okay. Next, we're going to create one last snippet, and we're going to create it from numbers, let's see, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 5, 6, 7, and 8, those are always used in Scrollview apps that use a Scrollview to determine where things go on a text view and a text field. So if you highlight numbers 5 all the way down to right above number 9, 5 to 9, because you can include in a snippet comments as well, which is helpful because when you bring up that snippet again, you can read what exactly that snippet was for, okay? So I'm highlighting 5, comment 5 all the way down to right below number 9. So I'm highlighting everything. Again, in the blue area here, click and hold it and drag it into the snippet, release it. And this one, I want you to name it Scrollview Point. Scrollview Point is what you're going to name this one. Scrollview Point is what you're going to name that one. And you're not going to delete these and add them back in, but I want to at least show you how you can do more than one function in selection and create a snippet from it. Now, the great thing about snippets are they're yours, and once you create a snippet, you can then reuse it. And one of the powerful things of iOS or any app development is being able to reuse your code over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? Because like I said earlier, every keyboard or every app's going to have to hide keyboard, right? Every app's pretty much going to have a UI scroll view. And so would it be helpful to do this over again for some of you?
No, I just wonder what you labeled.
I'd label the last one just scroll viewpoint. Scrollview point, so I have an idea of what it is. And again, it's just for you to understand what it is that you're creating. Okay? Yeah, from 5 to 8. 5 to 8.
5 to 8, yeah.
Nope, everything I have highlighted here, from number 5 all the way down to right there, right above 9. Okay? The homework assignment basically is what you're doing is, you're going to do what you do in the in class, but you're going to basically add more fields. But before we do that, I need everybody to, in your Xcode environment, go to File and Save in your Xcode environment. And then you're going to go to Xcode, quit Xcode. File, Save, and then Xcode, quit Xcode. Then you're going to bring up your GitHub app that you were running. Bring up your GitHub app. And you're going to have the ability now to check this in to your account. Okay? For the summary, I just want you to put week 5 in the comment and commit and sync it. Week 5 summary, and then commit and sync it. And make sure you have it selected here on the left, and you have the changes icon selected. Changes, and you've selected it here, and changes should be there already, but if not, you might have to click on your repo again and click on changes to see what I had up here initially. Yes, I'll come around and help you. There it is. Cool. Good to go. Week 5. Yeah, you said restart it. Yep. Week 5, commit and sync. Yep. Commit and sync. And by the way, you will see red and green both in that commit and sync, because remember we did delete that function and added it back in. So you will see red and green probably. Red just means delete. Green means add. Do you want to? You only have one in there, so yeah, it's going to be that, and then click changes. You already did that, and then click commit and sync. Always allow if you guys get a prompt from GitHub on logging in. And then you will need to go to repository menu, view on GitHub. Repository menu in GitHub, which is up on the overhead. It's on top of your GitHub. Right there, I'm pointing to it right now on the overhead. After you're successfully uploaded, meaning nothing else is down here, you can't sync anything, click the repository menu, view on GitHub. That URL is what you're submitting to week 5 in class. Okay? Whatever that URL is, that's what you're going to submit to the week 5 in class. So repository, you want GitHub.
And when we're doing this at home, when we're adding to it,
Yep.
how do we get that to go to the computer?
Well, I'm going to go over the homework assignment in just a second.
We have 2. One is the Xcode project file, one is the keyboard.
You want it?
We have 2.
No, yours is, that whole URL is yours. That is at the top. This whole URL at the very top is the one you need to grab. Yep, the GitHub URL, guys. So I'll bring up my GitHub URL, and that's the one you want to put in the week 5 in class. So I'm going to go to repository, show in GitHub, or view on GitHub. As soon as it comes up, right here at the top of GitHub, that's the link you need to copy and paste into week 5 in class. Okay? That's it. No changing. View on GitHub, let it load, copy and paste the URL. That is now your URL. That should say github.com / your username / week 5 hide keyboard Scrollview start. Yes.
Snippets reside on your local box.
Only on your local box, yes. They don't have the project, correct. Good question, Mike. Mike said, do the snippets reside in your local box, or do they go with the project? They reside only on your local box. Okay. Once you copy that URL, please paste that in week 5 in class, so you'll get points for the in class assignment. Okay. But you will need to copy that to to get points and submit it in week 5 in class. All right. If you need help with any of this, hang back and I'll help you before you leave. Okay, so we're going to go back to the 5 in class. I'm going to go next to the take home while you're submitting your in class and talk about your take home. So for the take home, you're going to basically create a new iPhone project, building upon what we did tonight from the in class. The app's going to allow the users to enter some text fields, more than the 3 we had tonight. Press enter key to hide the keyboard, press outside the text field to hide the keyboard, use the scroll view on under all objects. It also shows results of fields in the UI text view at the bottom, like tonight's app. So it's the very same concept, it's just you're adding more fields. I want you to add first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, phone, and email. Add whatever code needed, and then commit it to GitHub as always, due by next Monday. All right? This one you're going to do from the handout I first gave you that we did not use in class. That's step by step right up to the time where you added the code in tonight. Okay? There's also a podcast that will be viewable in our assignment link before you get home. So between this and the podcast, you go side by side. Some just like to watch a podcast, some like to do both, or some like to do either or. So either one works for you. And that's about it. If you've not turned in your final app assignment for last week, you have till midnight to do that tonight. Also, I would recommend doing some practicing on your forking and cloning this week. And the way I would recommend is go to our iOS course. Just start picking out some repos in there, right? From last semester, doesn't really matter, because all I want you to do is practice forking and cloning to your local Mac, making a little change and then putting it back up. All right, make sense? So forking and cloning. The one last thing I'll show you is in your GitHub environment, if you ever delete anything on your local Mac, let's say after tonight your Mac crashed and you lost everything on your Mac, which can happen, right? Since you've submitted everything to GitHub, you go to any other Mac, or once you restore your Mac, and just go to your GitHub page, make sure GitHub is installed on your Mac, log into github.com, clone it, and you're right back to where you started at. You haven't lost anything. That's why it's important, like I told you a few weeks back, to check in often and to commit often with your code. Because if you're doing that every time you're through, then you're not going to have to worry about losing what you've worked on. And it might be something so insignificant it doesn't really matter. Maybe you're just tinkering around for 8 hours, you didn't really lose much. But it might be something to where it's like you had a brainstorm. You had like a epiphany, and you're like, whoa, this was really cool what I just did. And then you didn't commit and sync it, and you've lost everything that you just worked so hard on. And believe you me, it's happened to me multiple times over the years of programming, and so in multiple languages. But source control has also saved me in multiple languages by having that stuff committed. And so it just takes a few minutes to commit it. By the way, one of the questions you might have in the back of your mind is, can you commit code that doesn't compile correctly in Xcode? Yes, you can. And if it's only you that's working on it, what's it going to hurt to commit code that doesn't compile correctly? If you're the only one working on it, right? If it's a team, it's another story. But if you're working on something previously, you don't have time to spend another 30 minutes to figure out what it is, but you don't want to lose what you've been working on, definitely commit and sync it. And put in the comment, hey, I've got an error on this view on line 65. I ain't figured it out yet. Come back tomorrow. And guess what? It'll still be there tomorrow. Nobody's going to magically come in and fix it for you. Okay? Believe me, I love it if they would, but it's not going to happen. Okay? So you guys did great tonight. You hopefully learned about tonight the concept of hiding the keyboard, scroll view, forking and cloning, and hopefully through these comments you're reading, it's going to help you kind of understand a little bit about what it is the code's doing. And I do recommend, like I told some of you that finished early tonight, to go back through those comments. If you didn't finish early, when you submit your GitHub and you get home, go through this in-class exercise again from start to finish. Do it all over again and read those comments as you go through. Because do not do the homework assignment until you understand the in-class assignment. Does that make sense? Because the homework assignment, you're literally building this app from scratch using the handout and the podcast, which you can do. I have no doubt you can do it. But it's just going to be one more hurdle if you don't understand the code behind it. Does that make sense? If you understand the code and the concepts of it, you're just going to have to be concerned with, okay, getting all my objects in there and getting everything labeled correctly and doing my outlets and actions correctly. Once you do that, then you'll be good to go. All right. The final apps I've seen come in so far have been pretty cool. Final app suggestions and descriptions. So looking forward to what you guys are going to create. We will, starting next week, the assignments will have 2 tiers. One is you can do a canned assignment, which is always built upon the in class, or you can take a concept from that week and add it to your final app. Okay, starting next week. And so literally week 6 next week, you'll begin working on your final app if you want to, which I definitely highly recommend it if you can. Now, there might be some weeks, like I mentioned last week, you will not be able to implement whatever it is we're going over that week because you're not going to use it. Make sense? You're not going to use it in your app maybe. That's fine. You can do the canned app then. But any chance you can get to implement it in your final app, the more time you have to spend on your final app, the better. Okay? Any questions? If you have any questions or need help, hang back. I'll help you. Otherwise, see everybody next week. And the podcast will be uploaded before you guys get home tonight. Good job. Thanks for helping each other. I'll come around and help you.